Hi, I'm Deborah Callahan, and today I'd like to kick off a video series on how to live like you're dying. In my life and in my work as a bereavement consultant, I'm constantly reminded of my own mortality, and I consider that a huge gift. When I live with the awareness and not the fear that I'm going to die, in fact, anybody in my life could die at any time, including my children, I'm able to fully accept the uncertainty of life. And that allows me to live in a completely different way. I'm free in a way that I wasn't before. A while ago, I had a conversation that made me realize my family is not quite as prepared as I thought we were. And that completely floored me. I had the pleasure of speaking with Ryan Glaser, who's an attorney with James River Law in Richmond, Virginia. Ryan is not only brilliant at what he does, he's one of the most compassionate people that I've ever met. Thank you for being here today, Ryan.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So, Ryan, what floored me in our conversation was that I realized that everyone over the age of 18, whether they have assets or not, needs two very important documents, legal documents. So could you tell us briefly what those documents are and why it's important for everyone over the age of 18 to have those documents?
Yeah, absolutely. So the five main components of the modern estate plan are the last will and testament, and then an advanced medical directive or a living will, healthcare power of attorney, a durable power of attorney, and a revocable living trust. And the documents that you're specifically referring to, I would argue that there are actually three that anyone that is 18 or older should have. And those start with the advanced medical directive. And the reason that these three documents are so important is because they plan for incapacity, where most people think an estate plan is only planning for your death or the end of your life. Now the modern estate plan provides for what should happen if you are incapacitated for even a brief amount of time, as well as what's going to happen with your assets and other things after you pass away. So it encompasses a lot more than just death or at dying. And so when someone turns 18, they reach the age of majority. And even though you're legally deemed an adult at 18 years old, I think it's no secret that very few people are actually independent adults at 18 years old. Usually, especially today, where like the generation of boomerang generation moving back into the home with our families or our parents after college, and especially with Obamacare, when they extended the age of being allowed to be on your parents' insurance to 26. A lot of people think that because of that, when their child turns 18, they're still going to be able to handle those situations, such as medical care, setting up appointments, helping them with prescriptions, or helping them, seek specialists if they need that. But unfortunately, under the law at 18, that's not possible because of HIPAA and other privacy laws. So it's important that even at the young age of 18, you do have these three documents. They're the advanced medical directive, a healthcare power of attorney, and a durable power of attorney. And now I'll tell you briefly what each one of those do so that you understand the need for those. So the first one that I mentioned is the advanced medical directive, which is also known as a living will. This document is going to provide for what your wishes are should you become incapacitated and it's been determined by at least two medical physicians that you're unlikely to recover. So we're talking about a situation where you are in a vegetative state or a coma, essentially, and you're brain dead. We're talking about a pull the plug situation, and in this case, the trauma and just your family is experiencing at that time, if it's coupled with having to make a decision regarding them essentially guessing whether or not you would want to have artificial fluid and artificial nutrition to keep you prolonging your life, even though your quality of life would not be there because you are, as I said, a vegetable at this time. That is a very difficult decision for your family to make. And so if you make these decisions ahead of time, and most people do decide that they want to have those things withheld because they don't want to become a burden for their family. The Hippocratic Oath says do no harm. But sometimes, doing no harm and keeping someone alive without a quality of life, it kind of defeats the purpose. And so a lot of people choose that they don't want to become a financial burden on their family, and that they don't want to be, kept alive with a machine and suffer any longer than necessary. Now, on the flip side, I have other people that say, no, I want to be kept alive forever. I want to be frozen and cryogenically frozen like Walt Disney, and maybe a miracle is going to happen in 100 years and they're going to bring me back to life. And that's totally fine as well. But the point is that you are going to have this document in place so that other people don't have to guess whether or not you wanted to be frozen or not. And that's a document that, is essential when you turn 18, because that's a time where you can have this document put into place as an adult. But also, you never know what's going to happen. And if it's just part of making sure you are ensuring that your family isn't stuck with these tough decisions, and that you have your wishes known so that whatever you want to happen is what's going to happen. And it takes out some of the mystique.
So that's just one document.
Yeah, so that's
Okay.
the first.
Okay.
The second one is the healthcare power of attorney. And
Okay.
this one is to allow someone to make healthcare decisions for you. And so a lot of times younger people all throughout school and throughout high school, their parents usually are the ones taking them to the doctor. They're sitting with them in the room. And now all of a sudden your child turns 18. They may still be a senior in high school, but technically they're considered an adult. And you, even though you're the parent, are not necessarily privy or given access to their medical records or anything like that without their consent. And so a lot of times you will be given a consent form at your child's doctor or their primary care physician, and that way you're allowed to call and ask about test results and things like that. And that's great. However, that document is usually specific towards that doctor or that medical institution. So if something ever happens to your child, let's say they're away at college and God forbid they catch COVID, and they end up in a hospital incapacitated. Well, you go to the hospital and they're not going to be able to tell you anything because your child is incapacitated, so they can't consent to signing off and letting you have these records or letting you have access to the medical care. And they're an adult, so if you don't have this in place beforehand, then you're kind of stuck. And it seems like you would automatically be allowed to do this as next of kin as a parent, but it's not always that simple. And if you just simply have one of these documents in place that you can bring with you to the hospital, it would make everything so much easier. And God forbid something happens where they are incapacitated for a long period of time and you don't have this document, your only place to go would be to go to the court, hire an attorney, and have the expense of filing for temporary guardianship through the state. And that's a long process too. And so in the meantime, everything can get held up. And so to avoid that, you just need to have this document. It's a simple document to have drafted. The last one, so the third one that every person that reaches the age of 18 should have, is going to be the durable power of attorney. Now, this one is for finances. So again, a lot of kids in college are still being financially supported by their parents. And there's nothing wrong with that. I feel like that's probably more the norm these days. And you think that because you are their parent, or you're the one that's been providing the money or putting the money in the account all the time, that you'll be able to easily access these accounts or pay bills on behalf of your child. But without having this durable power of attorney, that's not the case. Even if you are married to someone and you own property jointly with your spouse, that's still does not give you the ability to unilaterally sell or transfer or dispose of any of that jointly held property, because your other spouse is incapacitated. They're not dead. So the financial institution is still going to say, well, if they are not dead, we still need them to sign. And if they're incapacitated and they can't sign, then you're stuck.
Wow.
So if you have this document in place, it makes it so much easier, because you provide this document to the financial institution, and they, have to enforce it and validate it. If they have some reason that they think it's invalid, then they have so many days before they have to actually enforce it, and they have to do a writ. It's very difficult for them to not accept it the way the law is written, because they understand that in these situations, it's usually time sensitive. And so again, these three documents, they're not long documents usually. They're not very expensive to have drafted by a professional attorney who does estate planning. You can also, sometimes find statutory forms from your state's code. Under the state code laws, usually they will have some sort of short form, and that will work temporarily, but I do always recommend that you eventually have a more comprehensive document put together by an estate planning professional. But those documents, people don't realize, because you're young, you're 18, you think, well, I don't have a lot of assets, I don't need to think about estate planning. But especially at today's time, you never know. And it's best to be able to live your life knowing that you have these things taken care of, so that you don't have to have the fear of the what ifs.
For sure. And I think like having these documents in place would take a huge burden off of anyone's mind, actually. And again, allow you to live in a different way once you have all the legal documents in place, knowing that you've done what you could.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'd like to switch gears for just a minute here and ask you a question. So as someone who also, like me, works with end of life issues on a daily basis, could you tell us maybe about a personal pivot point in your life where you had to face tremendous amount of uncertainty or fear, and by facing that, you freed yourself to live in a more authentic and fulfilling life?
Yeah, that's a loaded question.
For sure.
But I think that there's been multiple points in my life where I have realized that, I needed to make sure that, my house is in order, and everything. You should only worry about things that you can control, and, try not to worry about things that you can't. And if you can eliminate some worry from the things that you can control, because you can go ahead and check them off your list, it can really help you be able to move forward in life without having lingering worries or thoughts. And I have had, you know, when I was born with a medical condition, a minor case of cerebral palsy from the waist down. They told my mom that I would never be able to walk. I've had, you know, a series of over 10 experimental surgeries throughout my life, where they would break my femurs, the bones in my legs, and rotate them and put metal plates in them. And one of the things that my family did really well was that they never let my disability hold me back from doing things, even if the doctor said, oh, you know, you shouldn't let him go horseback riding, or you shouldn't let him ride a four-wheeler or something like that. My parents said, if he wants to do it, we're going to let him try. And so I've always kind of had that attitude, but you know, there has been times where for example, in undergraduate, I was in an accident and I tore all the ligaments in my hip, and I went to school in another state. So I was in South Carolina at the time. My family was in Virginia. And that was really when I realized that I didn't have all the documents that I needed to have my mother, who was the one that was obviously the person taking care of me because she's my mom. And, you know, she traveled overnight down to South Carolina, drove all through the night to get there. And luckily it was something where it was my hip and I was still able to consent to giving her the ability to, you know, assist me in the recovery process and talking to doctors and things like that. But without that, you know, and until I was able to sign and put things into writing, she was unable to do that. And so it was after that we really looked at everything as a whole and determined that I needed to have these documents in place, even though I was 19 at the time, and that I needed to check my finances and have, you know, beneficiaries named as my mother for the time being, and have, you know, her named as payable on death or a joint account holder on my accounts, and to have in her possession a power of attorney and a healthcare power of attorney, so that if something ever happened to me again and I was unable to voice anything, that she would be able to immediately get more information and not feel left in the dark.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that story. I actually have a similar story of having, as a mom, to drive through in the middle of the night to another state, to an emergency room. And we didn't have those documents in place, but for some reason, no one explained that to us. And so now I know. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah.
And thank you for all the wonderful information today. If people would like to get in contact with you to get more advice or information, where can they reach you online?
Yeah, so you can reach us at www.jamesriverlaw.com, and we would be more than happy to help you with any estate planning or estate administration needs. We also do business law, and we have a cryptocurrency expert. So for any of those people that are interested in the cryptocurrency stuff that's happening in the news and everything like that, we're also able to provide guidance and help on that, which is pretty exciting. We're one of the few law firms in the state that have an expert in that field. So thank you again for having me. I always enjoy it, and I look forward to helping anyone. If they have any questions, they can also contact me directly. My email is rglaser@jamesriverlaw.com. So just shoot me an email and I'll be more than happy to talk to anybody.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Thank you.
Take care.